We have a flurry of people joining at the moment. As you join, if you have not already shared video and are capable of doing so, please do. We'd like for this to be as close to a round the table meeting as we can. Please skim at least the outline of the notes. Remember, you can open the outline by clicking the expand all in the right-hand view. If there is anything that is not on the agenda already, feel free to bash it in by adding to the notes in the place you think something should be discussed. It looks like our joining is starting to slow down, so we'll go ahead and get started. It's our tools team interim. Please remember that these sessions are being recorded and will be appearing on YouTube. We have a pretty full agenda for today. Does anybody have any changes that they'd like to make to the agenda that they don't feel comfortable making by just editing the notes document? Everybody can hear me fine? Volume is good? Okay. So we will just start jumping in through the topics for discussion. First topic I had, we have work in progress on post-confirmed. John is on vacation. I don't expect him on today's call. He's kept his work in Python 2. The statement of work that he's working under has porting the project to Python 3, but it looks like we have a good chance of making an interim release earlier, just making some modifications to the Python 2 version so we can deploy it in the tool chain as it currently exists. It's in the last set of testing. John's built a good test harness around the changes that he's made around post-confirmed in general. And we should expect to deploy this in the next couple of weeks. Jay, I see you joined the queue. Just jump in.
Yeah. Sorry, the notepad is empty. Is that intentional? Normally we have notes in there.
Say again?
The notepad is empty.
I didn't put the redirect that I normally do. We have a different schema that we started using for the notes before we started using Metaco that we've kept with. There's a link. Liz has put it into the chat room to where the notes actually are. Liz, if it's convenient or somebody else on the call, could you go to the notes page that's linked off of the data tracker agenda and just put in a go see the real notes over here message, please? All right, unless there are any questions about the impending changes to post-confirmed, we'll move ahead. We managed to work through getting notifications from Cloudflare to Identity Digital so that they could serve as secondary name servers for us, but we ran into trouble when we put those name server records into DNS. We didn't have a way to get the signature over those NS records into .org. We have an open ticket with Cloudflare where they're looking at what they could do differently. They've offered us a solution that would work with, ostensibly would work with what they offer right now, where Identity Digital would sign their name server records themselves, and we would pass this stuff into the .org domain by way of Cloudflare. We've asked Identity Digital if they'd be willing to do that, and are waiting to hear back. For the time being, we've removed the secondary name servers from DNS. It was actually causing real trouble with Deutsche Telekom subscribers. So we will put them back when we get this glue resolved. If I've said anything that's not quite right, anybody that's been involved in this, jump in and correct me. Cindy, would you please talk through where we are with the IAB website transition?
Sure. So at this point, all of the pieces that we're moving into the data tractor have been moved. We've got the appeals, the IAB statements, the minutes and agendas. So that's all done. The other thing tools-wise that we're waiting for is the RSS feed of IAB tagged blog posts in the IETF blog that I think Casara was working on, and I meant to follow up with you on that last week, and I did not get a chance. But that's I think the biggest thing. And then to the side of that, Liz and I met with Miria about a week and a half ago to go through the site as the actual temporary.iab.org site, talk about the content. She wanted some changes to the information architecture, so we've been moving things around based on that conversation. Liz has been working on content updates based on those conversations, and most of those changes are done. So we are really, really close on this. I feel like I've said that a couple of times, but I mean it this time.
Casara, I think I've mentioned already further down in the notes that you have the feed ready to go. We just need a new deployment.
Yes, so this will be in the next vector website deployment. We just have to make a decision on whether we are going to go with all the UI changes for IETF website or not.
And
awesome, thank you.
Casara and Greg are going to work that out. Yeah, I see nods.
So out of curiosity, do we have user for the RSS feed? It's so, I mean, I'm surprised it still exists.
Yeah, it's actually how the websites are going to talk to each other. The blog's going to live entirely on the IETF website, but the IAB website will show elements out of the blog. So it's the IAB website that is the consumer of the RSS feed.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
So the last thing I'd like to add here is that the next steps for moving things into the data tracker, since we moved the IAB agendas, statements, and appeals, we've got the framework for moving those kinds of artifacts into the data tracker, and I will be moving the IASG variants of those things in the next few weeks. I believe when I finish that move, we will have taken care of the last blocking items for shutting down www.6.ietf.org and can move forward with shutting that off. I'm going to move on. Over the last few weeks, we have tried a different way for deploying the IRTF website. We have a proposal in front of Colin right now. He's reviewing where the website is being served out of Blob Store in Azure. Just because Azure was had the feature set that we needed to be able to make it easy for Colin to deploy new versions of the website and have good previews of the work in progress from the repository that he already had. So when he finishes this review, unless he finds a showstopper, and his initial thoughts are that he's not expecting to find a showstopper, we will change the deployment over to this mechanism, and I expect we'll be doing that in the next couple of weeks. So it's a good prototype for simple websites that can be served out of blob stores that don't have any, back end logic that needs to run somewhere. So. No questions on that. I'll move forward. This next item, we've had a long-standing issue and an architectural problem with models in the data tracker explicitly linking things like nom-com feedback, for example, to a Django user record instead of the person that was associated with that Django user record. This has caused us grief when we've been cleaning up things with split persons and split users. We have a bit of work completed that will change these models so that everything in the data tracker hangs off of person, and the only thing that knows about user is that link from the data tracker person to user. Not entirely true. There's still a little bit that's buried under the covers with the OIDC gearing, but the primary business logic that we have when we're worried about documents and appeals and the nom-com feedback and all of these other things, they'll be attached directly to person. We have not been able to merge and deploy this work because we had a few personless users that were being used to log into the IMAP server. The IMAP server works directly against an identity, basically something that looks like an email address. It can't yet know about all of the email addresses that a data tracker user has. So this notion that we've got in the data tracker where you can log into the data tracker with any email address that the data tracker knows you about is not something that we can achieve with the IMAP server. We'll get there eventually. But because of this, the few people that were doing that needed to shift to using the actual user that was attached to their person, which involved them changing, basically redoing their mail client setup and re-downloading lists and whatnot. They've all done that. Their users have been fixed up. We're now going to go through the very large number of users that we have, most of which are, as I mentioned, likely bots that have no person, have never really had any login, and purge them and start to tighten the code so that we don't have creation of these userless persons. Sorry, personless users. So this is related to the problem that I mentioned before, where we end up with split person records because a person record's created when somebody submits a draft and they can't find the person associated with that author that's listed in the draft, or if somebody makes a nom-com nomination for someone that they've provided an email address or a name variant that the data tracker doesn't already know about, we'll end up with these duplicate person records that have to be merged. And we're merging. The merging tends to happen around meetings when people run into trouble with attending. And we're now to the point where we're merging, Ryan, would you say like 5 on average, 5 or 6 each meeting cycle? Yeah.
But yeah, right around there.
So it's a big, tricky effort. We expect to be completing this over the next 2 or 3 weeks again. So if anybody sees any fallout from it, keep in mind that we might be doing this and raise red flags. And we'll move forward. During 117, several of us got together and sprinted towards building a standing dashboard that could be used to show the progress of work in the IETF. Greg did a bunch of wireframe prototyping, started talking through that with the ISG to see what the ISG wanted. There will be continuing conversations with the ISG, and we're planning to do another sprint again later this week. We think we've got a good piece of technology for building out these dashboards, and hopefully we'll have something in place that we can actually be showing people during IETF 118. Greg, you have anything you want to add to that?
So maybe one thing, I remember, Greg, that you show us a static version of it, or maybe during the IETF meeting, during the debrief, but I'm not sure whether anybody at the ISG is following up on this. Maybe I'm wrong. Or did you get feedback?
I didn't get any further feedback than what was shared in the room. So,
Okay.
But I don't think there's anything further to follow up at the moment. As Robert said, we'll be sharing something when we have it.
Yeah, I will follow with you by email, if you don't mind.
All right, my next point, this will probably turn into an action item for, I guess it'll be Eric again, since he's the person we have on from the ISG. We are serving a copy of the leap second list file. We've been doing this for a very long time. I've lost track of who made the decision for us to do this in the first place. I don't know that we have this documented anywhere. People do know about it. Projects like Astropy, which I report on here, have the URL encoded into their software. That software, or something that is decided to pretend that it looks like that software, has been hammering our web server for many, many months at a very rapid rate. We are using Cloudflare to shed the load. We have the load down to something very small with a very aggressive rate limiter. But as I note, they're sending us currently around 1 million requests a day just for this one file. So it would be nice to find out why we have this file, and who should be on the hook for responding to questions about it. Jay, you are in the queue again.
Thanks. Yeah, I know the background to this. This is the what happens if IANA fails. That means that we have copies of various things from IANA on our website. And we did actually discuss this with the community some years ago when we got rid of a whole bunch of IANA things that we were keeping. I think it was the time zone database actually that we were keeping copies of. I mean, I understand the original reason for it, but and I think Russ was the person that's responsible for it. He's not on the call.
Right.
But IANA is designed to accept this level of requests. In fact, orders of magnitude greater than this for these sorts of things. And us having a copy of it in case IANA fails is one thing, but us serving the copy is a very different thing. And I don't believe that we should be serving the copy. So I think we can, and I also don't think we need to worry about keeping the copy personally. Since that time, IANA is now globally distributed, has all sorts of different things. They've invested, tens of millions and stuff. So they're an order of magnitude different from the way they were before. So I think we already have an agreement in principle to turn these things off. I can't find the reference just yet, but I think it's on tools discuss list, and I would suggest we go ahead and do that.
All right. Liz, could you capture that we are going to go through the process of turning this off? I'll contact Astropy and let them know that they should change the link that they've got to go directly to IANA, or drop it as a mirror out of their software.
So there was an explicit list of mirrors, and the IETF was one, or was it something like one DNS round robin and sometimes hitting our servers?
I think it was an explicit that we exposed a great deal of what used to be just at IANA on www.ietf.org, and it sounds like this was a subset of that.
Okay, thank you.
So there's probably quite a bit under www.ietf.org time zones, beyond just the sleep second file.
Just to add, sorry, it was when Roman ran the consultation on turning off FTP that we covered this, I believe. And there were, 70, 80 more, 90 messages on that. So I think that's reasonably well covered.
Okay. Unless somebody has something else to add, I'll move on to the next topic. So we have a lurking, looming issue that is, a few incidents have raised its importance. With the quality of the data that we have, we had this metadata associated with an email address about whether that email address is active or if it's the primary email address for someone. We have large parts of the data tracker when it sends mail will refuse to send mail to an email address that's inactive, and will hunt for the most recently active one or the primary one if that's set, and use that instead if somebody is trying to send mail to an inactive address. This isn't implemented everywhere that the data tracker sends mail. The submission tool is notorious for just sending mail to raw bits that come in as author email addresses. So there are issues that we have to go modify the way the data tracker sends mail to always pay attention to active or not, which we plan to leverage on dealing with having the data tracker do the right thing when it knows a participant is deceased. When you're dealing with like a draft submission with a deceased author. We had a problem with this most recent nomcom where someone was in that initial set of choices and didn't end up getting notified because the data tracker was using an address that was actually a bad address that had come in by way of a co-author submitting an internet draft and getting the email address wrong. And this didn't get straightened out until after the challenge period ended. So that person didn't end up on this nomcom. We need to put some pressure on making sure that these addresses are correct. I intend on the page where someone volunteers for a nomcom to make it very clear. These are the addresses that the data tracker will try to contact you at. These addresses won't be used, so that at least at that stage, there's a little bit of polish added to the quality of the data. We've got a very large number of records out there that have been acquired by way of internet draft submission when there wasn't a person already in place and a user to go with that person, where we scooped up the email address because we needed an email address to potentially reach the author, and that email address will end up in, say, the draft aliases, but it is otherwise marked inactive, right? So the question is, going forward, do we just mark these email values that come in by way of internet drafts always active? Do we try to do anything retroactively to the ones that are inactive? For the people that we've got that are users, we previously discussed, I believe, on one of these calls, having the data tracker at whenever they access, use the messaging framework to periodically tell them, you know, with the yellow box, hey, by the way, we think this is your set of active email addresses. If that's not right, go to this page and change them, right? So we're not annoying everybody all the time, but we annoy some of the people some of the time and eventually make this quality of data better. Are there other things that we could do? Yep, not hearing a flood of ideas. Do you think it would be worth yeah, just go ahead and jump in, Rich.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder if it's worth doing the same kind of pop-up notification when somebody registers for one of the meetings. I mean, it might get tiresome, and maybe you only do it like once every 2 years or something.
Yeah, if it's the first meeting you've registered for in. Yeah. Does anybody think just having a message that goes out to IETF General or to working group chairs or IETF announce? I mean, most of the people that would be following these lists are pretty active data tracker users and tend not to have bit rot on their settings.
I mean, my good
Possibly
feeling
the
is that
draft submission message could also have some additional words added that say, hey, you know, all of you authors, if you don't have a data tracker account, consider making one and making sure that the data tracker has the right way to reach you. Eric, what were you saying?
No, I was about to say the IETF announce. I'm not sure a lot of people are reading it, right? This is the sad story, so don't rely on it too much. And the other point, what are we doing with the bounces? Are they processed or simply dropped? Or there are too many of them to be useful?
We don't do anything with them automatically. It's not so much that there are too many of them, it's that doing anything with them automatically is dangerous, because you have these transient periods where you have bounces because somebody's ISP has done something silly.
Because, and not mistaken, Mailman is doing it automatically, right?
It can be configured to do so, but I think most people have their lists configured not to. There's an excessive bounces threshold that Mailman 2 has that some lists are using that will disable an address for excessive bounces. And we could, with Mailman 3, you know, if somebody does bother to log in, if if we disabled an address for excessive bounces anywhere in the system, we could, let them know on their next login that this happened. Jay, you're in the queue again.
Thanks. So as you all probably know, I send a survey out once a year, an IETF community survey, and I send it to every mailing address that is registered to one of our mailing lists, which is about 55,000 email addresses. I get about 5,000 hard bounces from that, and I get a few hundred more, like about 500 more or something, that are then have repeated hard bounces from that, and therefore mailman removes them. And so what I do is I take the full list that I get given from Robert, I populate a mailing list with it. I then use the mailing list to send out the survey, and then when I'm done with the survey, I export that list of members again, and the difference between that and what I was originally given are the 5,000+, who are definitely dead email addresses, I think. I've done it twice now and got, pretty much the same set of things. So there's, for example, there is a particular ISP or something in Korea that must have collapsed, and there are like 100+, just associated with that. So I think we've got some good data somewhere on this, but we've definitely got at least a 1 in 10 problem here.
And it's a subset of those addresses that would be associated with an account in the data tracker, I suspect. But we could do that analysis. Okay, I'll move along. We've had a discussion with a few people, Russ, Roman, I talked a little bit about this with Jay. As we change IT, change our IT infrastructure, one of the mechanisms that we've used to sign internet drafts isn't going to work anymore because the machinery won't be in place. The person won't be able to plug in the key the way we're currently plugging in the key. We're discussing what we could do instead, and the question was raised whether or not we need to continue signing IDs at all. So I wanted to just provide let everyone know that these conversations were happening. We'll be exploring whether or not we can just stop signing IDs. We'll wait for Jay to come back because I'm expecting him to say something here. And if we don't, then great, less work for us to do. If we do, then we'll work with the security ADs to come up with a way that is has acceptable security properties for making these signatures going forward. So during these conversations, it came up that one of the primary motivations for signing these things in the first place, and what's in RFC 5485, was to make it easier on the Secretariat when responding to requests about internet drafts. When was this the internet draft to be published, and when was it made available to the community? And it's not necessarily clear that these signatures have made things easier on the Secretariat. So if that remains the primary motivation, if nobody's really using these signatures for anything else, it may be that we drop it just because it's not achieving that goal. I don't see anybody, jumping to the mic violently saying, "Oh no, we really need to keep entering these draft signatures." So, all right. So these conversations will continue, and we'll do the right thing with consulting with the community, et cetera, and changing what we're doing.
I assume you're also consulting with the LLC council or something, as well as.
I don't think we have yet.
Probably worth asking him, because I can't, I've been involved in some legal stuff, and generally you just turn over what you have and you say, this is what we have.
Yeah. From a legal view, ID signatures are nonsense. No, they don't. No,
Yeah.
they don't mean anything. They do for documents, but for us, everything is a subpoena. That is then a notified a declaration from us as to what document existed at what time, and that's the only way that any of these lawyers want to do it, is that declaration from us. So the signature doesn't do anything.
Okay. I would say that gives you your answer right there.
Yep. All right. Unless anybody has something else they'd like to capture, we'll move on. We hit the FYI section of the agenda, so I would like to start moving a little more quickly. We're also nearly 40 minutes into our hour. So I would like, I think, to try, and I know, Eric, this isn't your favorite way of doing things, but to just give people a few minutes to read everything that's in the FYI section. And if you have any questions, to raise them. Eric, do you know when we're likely to have more feedback from the ISG on the yes, no, maybe, I don't care, go away, you've asked the wrong question?
Yeah, when you started to ask the question, I was looking for my unmute button because I was about to say something there. I think you are in the same ISG Slack channel as ISG is. So yes, we will go to the yes, no opinion, and with 3 buttons to be selected. If you don't select none of them, you are not considered no opinion. No opinion is kind of an opinion itself. That's all we want to say. You arrived on an email that I want to express this pretty clear, and I will make it pretty clear this week over email to discuss. That's the thing we wanted to do, right? To be minuted.
Yes.
Okay, I will do it. Let
Thank
me
you.
write a note here. Welcome.
All right. No other questions on the FYIs. Jennifer, do you have anything that you want to highlight about what's happening with Data Tracker? And there's a lot in this list. If you look at what happened with Data Tracker, we had a lot of code sprint activity. Some things like dark mode came in. Does anybody have any questions about what's going on with Data Tracker? Okay, we'll repeat this exercise for the Bib XML service. Sorry if you got anything you want to say, or if anybody has any questions. I'll make a comment here again that I'm still struggling with trying to make it easier for the secretary to the RPC to correct author names as they appear in the bib entries for specific versions of a draft. I think it's going to require an actual new set of data tracker views to be created to allow this editing to happen sensibly and to stick. So still a work in progress. XML to RFC. You'll see in Kasara's notes that there are many XML to RFC changes in flight that affect the rendered formats. Spaces move around, you know, the one of these is changing the structure of the XML to, as mentioned, avoid stripping the T tags. All of these things are probably good fodder for people to pay attention to when they're considering the, do we republish, make new XML for already published XML? Do we re-render, and when do we re-render? So hearing no questions, we'll repeat this for author tools and the Wagtail website. Lars isn't here. He'd have something to ask about IDNets 3, but for Mail Archive.
Robert,
Ryan,
sorry,
yeah,
so is it worthwhile explaining to people the importance of it being a Node.js CLI ESM library?
Yeah, I think we touched on this on a previous call, but it's worth touching again. The idea for IDNets being rewritten entirely as a Node, a JavaScript library thing, is that it will also live directly in the editors that we're building for the RPC that might have good reuse for authors in the long run. So. We might also be able to, we will also be able to leverage it to do early work on ID submission before somebody, is actually bothering the back end with the submission. The front end will have given submitters some feedback. So. And the last item we've got on here, I haven't seen Joe on screen. It looks like he is connected to the call though. The changes, as Joe reported here, well, I should just let him talk. Joe, if you're here. No, I'm not hearing anything. The rate of changes on in catalog have gone way down, and we're going to be having a series of conversations about what ongoing support for it looks like, and who should be responsible for doing this support, and that's going to start a little bit later this week. All right, we're 46 minutes into the hour. What do we need to talk about that we haven't talked about? So one of the things that I'm planning to do on future calls is to bring more things like this issue with the freshness of the email addresses up for discussion during these calls. When we have large clusters of issues around problems in the data tracker features that people want that aren't easy to implement, I'd like to start getting feedback from the people who are showing up here around those issues so that we have more ideas coming in. Does everybody think that's a good use of this time? All right. Unless someone has something else they'd like to discuss, I think we're done for today. Thank you again for the time that you spend helping move the tools along and everything that everybody here does to make the internet a better place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you all soon.